One rookie running back I want to talk about, because I agree, I think Tootin's going to be one of our finalists. And I hate to do it because, producer Colin's going to make him happy, but Jaydon Blue, running back 43 with the Dallas Cowboys, does stand out to me. And I think the first thing that people will say here is, well, he's small. He's not a feature back type. Maybe he isn't a feature back type. That being said, Bucky Irving was 5'9", 192 pounds when he measured at the NFL Scouting Combine. And Jaydon Blue is 5'9", 196. So that doesn't mean that Jaydon Blue is Bucky Irving from a skill set perspective, but size-wise, we just saw a dude who maybe isn't necessarily the prototypical size at the NFL running back go ahead and have this season that we're outlining here as one of these great breakout seasons of Bucky Irving. Jaydon Blue also is in an unsettled backfield as well. They've got Javonte Williams. They've got Miles Sanders. Okay. I mean, and this looks like an ecosystem, Scott, that could take a big leap. They were, just in terms of EPA last year, they were 29th was the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, Dak Prescott got hurt, but they also weren't off to a great start when Dak was under center. I'm interested to see what Brian Schottenheimer does as the head coach and full-time play caller now, but they also brought in Clayton Adams from the Arizona Cardinals. They drafted Tyler Booker as the right guard. So with Adams coming over from the Arizona Cardinals to be the offensive coordinator, getting a promotion from their line coach, run game coordinator, and this is a big, badass offensive line of Cooper Beebe and especially Tyler Guyton take a step. I think the passing game is going to be good with George Pickens in the mix here. Checks a lot of boxes in terms of what we are looking for in Jaydon Blue as a late round sleeper.
Yeah, I'll sign off on Blue as a sleeper, but the problem I have with him is that, like, if you compare his final year of college with Irving, I mean, Irving had, I think, like 75 more touches in that neighborhood with one fewer game. Blue was always a rotational guy at Texas, yes, undersized, right, had a little bit of a fumbling problem. And I do think the shape of the obviously he doesn't have much to beat out. They have such ordinary veterans in front of him. I also think Dallas has a chance, despite having Micah Parsons. I think the defense could be mediocre. And if Dak can stay healthy, and that's been a problem for the last few years, yeah. But if Dak's healthy, man, obviously CeeDee Lamb is a god. If they can just get George Pickens to accept that he's not the number one guy, if he can live as the number two, I could see real carnival potential with the Cowboys. And maybe Dak has one of those seasons where he throws 650 or 700 passes, and Blue could be the guy who makes a lot of sense as a pass catcher, as a hurry up back, that type of thing. So I could see him being very useful. I just don't see the path for him ever being a workhorse. I don't even want to say bell cow, because there's like 2 or 3 bell cows in the league now. Right. And that's kind of a dead thing. But to me, it's like, is Jaydon Blue going to be 10 to 13 touches, or can he get up to that like 15 to 17, 16 to 18 touch? I just don't know that he has the body type and the resume to handle that threshold. So that means I can't put him as a finalist on my clipboard, but I think he's very draftable, because I think I see a lot of 33-30 football coming with Dallas, and I think Jaydon Blue's skill set will fit well, and he'll be, again, as like kind of like, that Sigmund Bloom, what the heck flex. I think we'll be saying that with Jaydon Blue a few times this year.
Yeah, he was much more productive as a receiver. And I think that's where he'll have some fantasy value this year. Because if he gets on the field, I think it's going to be in passing situations where, again, he was very productive as a receiver in college. So I think he probably doesn't necessarily fit the bill here in terms of this year's Bucky Irving. But there's a lot of overlaps with the situation, with some of the things I outlined. It's just, is he as good as a runner as Bucky Irving? Probably not. Even if people do think he can play above his size, that's sort of where I think the comparison ends, and that's a pretty critical part to the whole thing. But I agree with Scott. He's probably not a finalist, but certainly someone that I do want our listeners to be drafting in the late rounds, because it's an unsettled backfield. And if he has passing down value, he's going to have some value in fantasy, especially if he, just beats out one of these veterans like Javonte Williams or Miles Sanders, for some of those passing down touches. But I want to throw these two other, go ahead.
So throw out one more thing. I was talking to my buddy Chris, who's a really good fantasy player, the other day, and he was looking for an underrated possible stack. I just want to throw this out there. This just really has nothing to do with our conversation today, but we settled on Dak Prescott with one of the receivers and one of the pass catchers in Dallas as kind of the underrated stack that you might be able to get at an affordable cost. I just want to throw that out there as something that I'm interested in.
I'm getting really high on George Pickens this season, man. I just got finished charting him for reception perception. There were some times last year where he was so good. There was the usual George Pickens BS, where everybody knows the George Pickens experience, but I really do think he took a step as an individual player last year. It was really hot and heavy in the first part of the year, and then ironically he had that terrible game against his now current team, the Dallas Cowboys, where it was just a lot of like loafing and a lot of, and just again, the George Pickens experience. But man, if he's dialed in, he's locked in, I feel like he could have a T. Higgins type season, where he is the number 2 receiver on an offense that's throwing the ball all over the yard. And he just wins a lot of those like X receiver plays, and he could score double-digit touchdowns this year. So yeah, I do think that obviously, like, can you get CeeDee Lamb on your fantasy team is going to come down to where you're drafting in the damn first round. But George Pickens could be a guy who I still think at this point, like, he's currently not going in the top 30 receivers. I do wonder if he's going to be one of these hype bunnies in the offseason. Actually, excuse me, he just crossed into like wide receiver 29. I do wonder if he's going to be one of these hype bunnies in the offseason because he's already had a good mini camp. The Cowboys love to talk about themselves. Pickens is a very easy player to like in practices because he makes these crazy catches. Could he end up climbing ahead of some of these names that we have here? Certainly. But I do want to be like proactive on getting Pickens on some fantasy teams this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't even mind having Prescott and Jake Ferguson. And I hope that this wide receiver trade, this Pickens trade, turns out better than the Jonathan Mingo trade.
Shoot, I hope it turns out better. I hope it turns out better. Well, shoot, that's a low bar to clear. I hope it turns out better for a lot of like former Steelers that go elsewhere. Let's hope it turns out better than the Deontay Johnson trade. Let's hope that George Pickens isn't playing for the Texans during the playoffs or the
crazy career that Juju Smith-Schuster has given us. Man, Juju Smith-Schuster used to be the man. He'd be like a first or second round pick. It just feels like 100 years ago.
Yep, I remember fighting the Juju Smith-Schuster wars where I was a big loser and then kind of a big winner. So that's the way teams go. That's the way things go, man.
Sleepers, breakouts, and busts right now for the NFC East on FFT Express. So yeah, it was a couple months ago maybe we had to write our player outlooks.
Yes.
So Dan assigned us divisions, and he assigned himself the NFCs. It's a huge surprise for all of you know Dan. So Dan's on the show to give us a sleeper breakout and bust in the NFC East, although I'm going to help out. So how about a sleeper?
For me, the sleeper is going to be Jaydon Blue. Really enjoyed watching his tape at Texas. I felt like he was a player who reminded me in some ways of a old school fantasy guy that you may remember from Cal, who played on the Detroit Lions. Do you think you can guess from Jaydon Blue's profile?
Javid Best?
Yes, Javid Best. A little bit of best in him. Not quite level of best. Best if he never got the injuries would have been an amazing NFL player and more in like the Chris Johnson light. This is not that, but he could easily, in my mind, be the best player in this Cowboys backfield from a talent standpoint and the most effective. And in my mind, he could actually take over a pretty big role right away. So he's my favorite sleeper in the division.
So, it's interesting because I'm starting to really think that Javonte Williams might be that guy, might be that sleeper.
I can't do it.
I know he's been so bad the last 2 years, but I kind of could buy the excuse. He had such a serious knee injury, and he says he's finally back to being healthy. And I feel very confident that he's going to get the first shot. So I went from a guy who was Javonte Williams is basically a nothing.
Yeah,
Javonte Williams might be the best sleeper in fantasy football.
He might be, if you're right. And what he said is true, that he finally feels back to his health. But I've heard that line from players thousands of times since I've started doing fantasy football. And what would you guess? There's no science behind this. We can't age or stat it. But what would you guess would be the percentage rate of when players say they finally feel healthier, they finally feel themselves, does it actually come out playing true? You'd say it's probably under 60%, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. That's the thing, but it's 2 years now, right? So this is what happened with Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin had a great bounce-back season 2 years removed from his ACL injury, and he said that it took him a long time.
Godwin was a great player before the injury. I'm not sure Javonte Williams ever was a great NFL player before the injury.
Well, he only had a few games at the end of his rookie season and a few at the beginning of his second season, so we don't know. But I do think Javonte Williams or Jaydon Blue, I think the Cowboys are an interesting team. Is their starting running back? We don't know who it is. They're probably going to be a good offense. They usually are. There's if a guy can take over, just look what happened with Rico Dowdle. He was a very valuable player second half. So
exactly.
Let's keep an eye on this because you don't have to spend a top 100 pick on a Cowboys running back. You may not even have to spend a top 120 pick on a Cowboys running back. Okay, a breakout for you. You want me to do the breakout?
You could hit the breakout. I have a couple. Go for it.
I'm going to stick with the Cowboys. I'm going to go George Pickens. I don't think he's ever finished higher than 36 per game in PPR. And I think being the number 2 receiver on a good passing offense will be better than being the number 1 receiver on a subpar, I won't say bad, but a subpar passing offense. And, he was in a pretty good stretch with Russell Wilson. He was only the number 30 wide receiver per game with Wilson, but in that was 8 games. The first 6 games of that stretch, George Pickens was the number 14 wide receiver per game. Then he missed 3 games with an injury, and he came back and he was absolutely terrible against Kansas City and Cincinnati. He had 4 catches for 50 yards in the last 2 games of the year. But he was actually a pretty consistent player in his first 6 games with Russell Wilson, and that was with really bad touchdown luck. So I think we saw a very brief stretch of him being a number 1 receiver and being a top 15 wide receiver. I don't expect that, but I think top 30 is good. A good safe kind of floor for, I wouldn't say floor, safe expectation for George Pickens. Extremely talented guy, and I don't expect a ton of targets or catches. I sort of expect a light version of Jamison Williams. Big play potential on an offense that's not as good as Detroit, but good. And I like him beginning in maybe the 6th round. I'd love him in the 7th round.
Okay. I like that value. I think I can get on board with that. Dallas is going to be, like you said, one of the higher scoring offenses. Their offensive line is still trending up, and they continue to invest in it with another 1st round pick. So I'm in on that.
All right. Unfortunately,
yes,
I want to check his ADP.
Okay. Because
he's a 5th round pick on. Yeah, so he's a 5th round pick on Fantasy Pros, but he is a 6th round pick on CBS. And it's just a huge difference for me. All right, we're going to take a break and talk about a bust in the NFC East after this. Back here on Fantasy Football Today Express. So sleepers, we're looking at the Cowboys running backs. Breakout, I'm looking at George Pickens. And Dan can get on board, which is good. How about a bust?
For me, it's Brian Robinson Jr. I went over this on a few shows ago, maybe a month or 2 ago, but really what it comes down to with Brian Robinson Jr. averaged under 2 targets per game, 1.71. I don't see that taking any kind of jump, if anything, maybe to 2 to 3. So there's no involvement in the pass game whatsoever. And it comes down to, with Robinson, can this offense be as successful as it was last year? Because it was wildly efficient, with a year of defensive coordinators having a film on the scheme to take away. We saw what happened with CJ Stroud when teams got film. This is what happens with a lot of rookie quarterbacks going from year 1 to year 2. People expect a big jump from year 1 to year 2 with quarterbacks. It oftentimes is the opposite. Year 3 is usually when that real jump happens. So I'm a little worried about that offense, and I'm worried about, if that offense isn't what it was, what is Brian Robinson for us? He's a guy who relied on touchdowns in my mind. And that's just not a player I would want to invest in with no receiving profile, because I mostly play in PPR leagues.
Yeah, obviously his value changes a lot in non-PPR. Yeah. Half PPR, he's still kind of a liability. Full PPR, he's risky. I agree with your sentiment about Brian Robinson Jr. He is going to have to score touchdowns. I just think he will. And if you look at him last year on a per game basis, he was running back 21 in non-PPR and 30 in full PPR. But he left 2 games early. One of them with an injury. One of them was week 18. You remove those 2 games and he's top 24 running back. And guess where he's going in Fantasy Pros ADP? He's RB 30. So I almost feel like I agree with you. There's not a lot to get excited about here. There's not a league winning potential. There's not big upside. Like, for example, if you're choosing between Brian Robinson Jr. and Cooper Kupp, who's 2 picks later, and you don't care about the position, I'd go with Cooper Kupp. But getting drafted as RB30, I actually like that value a lot, because I don't really think he can do much worse than that. I don't think there's competition that's taking him off the field, basically. So he'll be fine. He won't be great. I see your point. I just feel like he's being drafted almost as a bust.
Yeah, that's fair. It's not like you have to make a huge investment.
All right, we haven't talked about any Eagles. You think Saquon Barkley is going to be a bust?
No, I'm on the Saquon Barkley train. He's my RB1 overall, so no.
Okay, you were thinking about making Tyrone Tracy a breakout call. How do you see the Giants back right now?
Thing is, for a while I wasn't on that train, Adam, and then I went back over the last couple of weeks, really the last week, and watched a ton of Tyrone Tracy, all 22. I was just so impressed with the way that he paces his runs, with his vision, with the subtle cuts he uses, great space. I think going back through some Dable data, he really has leaned on one back and tried to, even last year when Tracy got the hot hand. So I think Tracy will actually be that one. There's been a lot of expectation it'll be just like a full split with him and Scadaboo, or like maybe like a 64 or 60 or 50-40-10 with Singletary. I think it will be more Tracy. So I'm willing to bet on the possible breakout there.
All right, that's it for Fantasy Football Today Express. Hope everybody has an awesome 4th of July weekend, and we're back on Monday on Fantasy Football Today. See ya.